bookshop. It's the bookshop. It's the bookshop of Beverly Farms.
Howdy, everybody. It's Sam Feifel, your host of John Updike's Ghost, your favorite little podcast about reading, writing, literature, bookstores, awesome books, and all things terrific. I am joined, as always, by the lovely, the talented, my sister, co-host of this podcast, and co-owner of the bookshop of Beverly Farms, Miss Hannah Harlow. How are you doing today, Hannah?
Wow, that felt like quite an intro. I'm great.
I feel like I gotta, hype it up a little bit, let everybody know how awesome this podcast is.
It is so awesome. It is also maybe the most awesome day of the year, just weather-wise.
Oh,
It's
really?
so nice.
No,
Yeah.
It just went cloudy up here in the great state of Maine. I'm sorry.
Oh, it is spectacular. Down here in Massachusetts. Too bad you're not here.
Too bad. We have already discussed that it is summer reading season, so we won't go too far into summer reading, other than to tell you that you would be seriously remiss. In fact, you would be missing out on a seriously awesome opportunity if you did not come to Hastings House to hear the action-packed 4-author discussion of summer reads and how cool they are, and actually had a very interesting conversation with Kathy George about Elin Hilderbrand and how much industry she has probably created all by herself over the course of the last 20 years. Summer Reads, which is happening on June
23rd. It's a Sunday, 2 p.m. at Hastings House, which is in Beverly Farms, right around the corner from the bookstore. There will be 4 authors in attendance. They all have paperback fiction books out that are fresh and hot and ready for your summer reading. We're going to talk about those books and others that people like to read, what makes a good summer read, etc.
Does every single one of the 4 books that are going to be at this event start at Memorial Day and end Labor Day?
No.
Oh,
I'm so sorry. That is not the case.
There's some that are outside of, because I'm starting to become a summer read purist. It's like, It's not bluegrass if there's not a banjo. And now I'm starting to believe it is not a summer read if things go past Labor Day.
Ooh, okay. One of my books that we're going to talk about today, I would consider a summer read because it is set in the summer and, for other various reasons. But it's not like Memorial Day to Labor Day. It's like a week in July or whatever.
Okay, that's fine. But if it wraps before Labor Day, it just can't go. There cannot be any winter. Nobody's walking in the snow. There cannot be any heavy jackets in this book. Yeah.
So one of our summer reads, it's a book by Hannah Halperin that I'm reading right now, and it's quite good. She's a very good writer.
Is this an agenda book, or are you trying to slip the book in?
I'm slipping this in.
That's fair.
It is called, I Wish I Lived Here Forever. Sorry, now I don't have it in front of me. But it's set in Madison, Wisconsin, and it's at an MFA program. So you're actually in the school year and stuff. So I think that's going to be a discussion about why is this a summer read? Yeah.
It sounds like a campus novel to me, not a summer read. Let's not go mingling genres here. Actually, that would be a great summer read, as a campus novel that starts after graduation and ends before matriculation in the fall.
Interesting.
And it's both a campus novel and a summer read at the same time.
That is, I was thinking The Idiot by Batuman. What's her first name? But anyway, that's, it goes through the whole first year of freshman. And then there's a big summer section.
Well, anyway, let's get to
what are we talking about?
I have 2 books. This might be the best 1-2 punch I have had in some time for the podcast. I'm going to have lots of good things to say about both these books. First is the new Keanu Reeves China Mieville book.
I am so excited you read that.
Is big time.
Cannot wait to hear about this.
Yeah, I hadn't heard a thing about it when I found it on our ARC shelf. And now I've actually seen Wired had a big interview with China Mieville and all kinds of stuff. It's getting some press. I mean, it has to. It's Keanu Reeves.
It's China Mieville, who's like pretty big time too.
Right, and he hasn't had a book out in a while. Yeah.
Right.
And the other one is maybe the book of the year candidate right now. Wouldn't surprise me if this wound up on the Pulitzer list. Is Fire Exit, Morgan Talty's first novel, a follow-up to Night of the Living Rez, his short story collection that
yes, and we have both read this book. I am super pumped to talk about it.
Yes. So that's my agenda. What do you have?
I have The Return of Ellie Black by Emma Jean, which is like a mystery thriller. I have A Good Life by Virginie Grimaldi. It's French book, work in translation.
Cool.
And then I have, speaking of Elin Hilderbrand, I have Swan Song, her last book, which comes out this week. And then she goes into retirement.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that because we were just talking about the summer reads. Kathy George is our retired children's librarian here in Greater
So fabulous. We love her.
Yes, she has become a regular customer of the bookshop at Beverly Farms. And she was talking about being excited for Ellen's final novel and what a big deal. And I was positing that she has really like launched this whole summer reads genre, maybe not single-handedly, but she is at the vanguard of what I think has become a legitimate literary genre when you really start to think about it.
Sure.
Is that it has these guardrails. It gives people something what they know what to expect. And, so we were kind of talking about why people like it. It's like, yeah, sometimes there is a little death and destruction every once in a while. There's some, heavy hitting drama. But in general, some people don't like detective fiction because it's like crime and underworld and people getting murdered and all this sort of stuff. And, people are looking for something predictable in the same way that, doesn't sort of have the same trappings. It's much more about family and it's about relationships and it's about drama of the sort of gossip kind and less about the, people dying kind.
I have many thoughts about this. I also just wrote an article for The Cricket that you can read maybe next week. But it's all about this. But, we hosted Elin Hilderbrand for an event last fall, as a lot of people know. And I've become kind of a super fan, even though I haven't actually read that much. But
I've never read a word of hers, actually.
I've read a couple now.
Not one.
Great. I mean, I think what she does is actually incredibly hard to do. And obviously, otherwise, like a lot of other people would be doing it.
Yeah.
I agree. So I think of her, lately I've been thinking of her as kind of like a modern day Edith Wharton, but without the tragic endings. Like you're going to get like a pretty happy ending. But like, I remember when I was in grad school, one of my teachers was like, you've got to read Edith Wharton. She's amazing. And I'm like, oh, she sounds kind of boring. And she's like, no, she's so gossipy and awesome.
Yeah.
And I read it and I was like, yes, this is totally gossipy. And it's all about the like social mores and like who's like, working the like social structures of the day. And that's exactly what's happening on Nantucket of like, various people on the island and like, who's got more money than the other person and like who's got the gossip and like who did it. Like it's
I was
so
going to
good.
say Jane Austen. I mean, it's the same thing. It's all about your place in society and what your prospects are and how you can be rich in sort of family, but poor in, prospects and all that kind of stuff, which again, I've never read a page of it, but I've read enough about her. That's my impression is that, in the same way that people say that Jane Austen basically invented the modern comedy, I think Elin Hilderbrand invented this,
modern summer read.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is like her 30th book, I think. She did say she's retiring. I mean, she's not totally retiring. She's writing a couple books with her daughter that have, are coming out next year, I think. I'm sure she's going to have other books. But so at the event, she said, like, I've written 30 books basically about these people on Nantucket. Like, I'm kind of done writing about that, which I think is fair. But the other thing I wanted to
they were split. They're not all Nantucket.
They're not all Nantucket. Right? There's a St. John's series.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But the other thing she said at the event, which struck a chord for me, was she's like, I'm never going to win a National Book Award. I'm never going to win a Pulitzer. She's like, that's not what I write. But like when reviewers describe me as like writing breezy novels, like actually breezy's pretty hard to do, and breezy takes a lot of work and effort, and like I spend a ton of time writing and rewriting. And
well, so you said that like she's awesome at what she does, right? Like, what are the markers as someone who has an MFA in creative writing and studies craft and all that sort of stuff? What does she do well?
I think her characterization, like she can like do it in a snap, right? Like she's incredibly efficient in like setting a scene, like kind of letting you know who this character is. Like you're just like immediately like, oh, I know, I can like picture that person, and like you get that vibe. And her pacing is awesome. She also kind of invented or created this collective, like third person we voice, or first person
collective. Yeah.
Yes, we voice that's kind of like the voice of Nantucket, just like all the residents, you know, that's kind of like that gossipy vibe is how she achieves it, of like, we all knew this, we all did it, like. And
so it's like a omniscient narrator, but it's like the voice of the community.
Yeah, it's like the people of Nantucket, like the residents.
I don't know if I knew that.
I think it's really interesting, but I think it's incredibly effective, and like not something you're seeing in a lot of other books that works, but it like really works for her. So she can kind of go back and forth between all these different perspectives really easily. Like I'm not
so
quite
you're
done.
Looking over their shoulder, but you have this like collective knowledge base of like the community. Like we all know that, you know, this person's father was a drunk, and we all know that this person failed out of high school, and we all know that this person was the captain of the baseball team, but we're still looking over somebody's shoulder so that
she'll move into like, okay, now we're, you know, in this person's perspective.
Right.
And now we're in this person. Like, so she's just continually moving between perspectives. But one of the perspectives is that, you know, collective voice.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
I like that. That's good. I like that.
Yeah. So I'm finding Swan Song to be, you know, like she's just so solid at this point that I don't know that she has duds. Like you're just like, yeah, this is great, and this is what she does, and she's doing it well again. Like it's a good story.
Well, it's interesting because I think that's a good segue into Fire Exit.
Okay.
Because I think one of the most interesting things to talk about with Fire Exit, and again, this is Morgan Talty. He is a writer from Maine. He is a member of the Penobscot Nation. And he, Light of the Living Res was a book of short stories that, you know, really caught fire a couple of years ago when it came out. And his, you know, long-awaited first novel. It is set again in the Penobscot Nation, or sort of Penobscot adjacent. There's some really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
You know, some really interesting stuff about what it means to be native, not native, and, you know, all kinds of things. But I think one of the most interesting things to talk about in the book is the voice, right? So it's this first person narrator, but like, who is this narrator talking to, right? Like they're sort of talking to their daughter, or they're talking to us, or they're talking to themselves, you know, like, or, you know, they're talking to all three of these people. Like, we don't know if they're always in their right mind. But also, like, you know, so the main character is like someone who grew up outside of the Penobscot Nation, like across the river. You know anything about Maine, like basically across the Penobscot River from from Indian Island, as they call it, and you know, is not native because is the son of a non-native woman who married a native guy, and when, you know, they take the roll call, they don't count as native.
Right, but he grew up.
Like grew up amongst them, and like knowing, being, you know, infiltrated into like their cultural ways, and went to school there, and so, super interesting. And was super tight with his stepdad, who taught him, you know, how to hunt, and all the stuff, and all the language and the you know, culture and all that sort of stuff, right? But it's just like a not very well educated drunk who works as a logger, right? Yes. And so there are times where, like, you know, and sometimes I like underline them, or I'm trying to think of like a good example, like, you know, where the narrator speaking in the first person will have this like turn of phrase, like, by the river, I watched the sky grow brighter, a reddish orange hue, not quite unlike the soft chest of an eastern bluebird, you know?
So
and
you
I'm
thought that was a
like,
little too,
well, I'm just like,
not the quite right voice for someone.
just like, is this
who's a
dude
drone?
like a writer?
Yeah.
Is this dude literary? Is this dude read a lot? Like, because it seems like he drives a truck and drinks beer and smokes cigarettes and stares across the river. Like,
that is basically all we see him doing for most of the novel.
Right. And so it's like there's times where what are we supposed to take away from like how thoughtful this dude is and how, you know, observant this dude is. And like there's part of me that thinks like the character is much more meant to be an avatar than it is like a real person. And then at the same time, one of the things I like about the book is, you know, just like Harry Hervey last week, like super gritty and real and believable. And I know who these people are and like the conversations that they have at the bar and like the interaction with his like dementia having mom, like all of it like rings so true to me. But then there are these times where I'm sort of taken out of it by like, this dude shouldn't be this smart.
So that didn't bother me. And I think because like I kind of explained it away to myself as like, this guy is in a bit of an arrested development where like he knocked up so this is the premise of the book, right? And this all happened before. He knocked up his girlfriend who is Penobscot, and she basically then dumps him because she lies about the birth father and tells everyone the birth father is also Penobscot because of blood quantum. If, you know, everyone knew the real dad, the kid wouldn't be able to enroll.
Wouldn't get a full share in the money. It's all about money.
Just like identity, right?
Identity too, but I think the driver is money, right? Like you get a share of like the settlement money and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. So I have more to say about that in a minute because I've been reading another book about blood quantum, but about nonfiction. But anyway, so he settles across the river from his ex-girlfriend and kind of watches his daughter grow up without her knowing who he is or anything about him. And so the novel opens with him deciding it's like time for her to know, like he's going to tell her, right? But then she goes
she's like
missing.
27. Yeah.
Right. But then she kind of disappears. And so then you're kind of looking for her for a little while, right? I read it a while ago.
I mean, you know, she comes back pretty quickly. So what it gets into is like this really interesting exploration of what it means to like share blood and DNA and heritage, right? And it's
I mean, I think it's really about blood quantum, right?
Yeah,
and like
ultimately, you know, it's about how separate and different are our identities from our DNA, right?
Yes,
and so
exactly.
You know, and so this dude's daughter that doesn't know him starts showing signs of like this terrible depression. And his mother has always been depressed. And clearly he thinks he himself is likely been depressed. And he's seen the way that his mother is, and he sees that is happening to his daughter, but he can't tell his daughter that he knows about this legacy of depression,
right?
Because he's being shielded from her so that she believes that she is like full-blooded Penobscot, right? Yeah. And so like, you know, what is it, you know, do we inherit depression? Do we even know if that's true, right? They talk about how trauma is passed down through the DNA, you know, how much of her experience would have happened regardless of who her parent was and how much is directly related to the fact that he's the father and, you know, like how much it matters to Native people because on, you know, and like on one hand, they are, you know, they've been discriminated against. There was a genocide. Like the white man came to Maine and wiped out 95% of the Wabanaki people, right? So they carry this huge DNA trauma anyway. But they're also so proud of their heritage. And how dare you say that I'm not Native? And like, why are you protecting this legacy that has led to so much harm? And, you know, it's just, it's an incredible way of exploring like what it means to be who you are and why you cling to the labels that you do.
Yes, totally. Yeah. And I mean, so as I was saying, I think he's kind of in this arrested development because he never was able to like move on into adulthood because he was kind of stuck like watching his kind of real family across the river or whatever. And he just like couldn't get on with his life. And then he's depressed and, you know, just dealing with all this stuff. And so I feel like I could explain away, like, yeah, maybe he is a literary dude and he just never really got to live his life. So I was okay with that. Yeah. But it is an incredible way to explore all of those things. And I also think it's so interesting, like Morgan is an enrolled member. We've talked about this before, like what stories are people able to write? And we both agree, like everyone should be able to write the story they feel compelled to write if they, do the work, whatever. But like, I don't know. I was just thinking like Morgan was like, yeah, I'm going to write the story of like this white guy who's not native as a native writer. Because he has strong beliefs about like what blood quantum means to tribes and to tribal enrollment. I'm reading a book right now called Becoming Little Shell by Chris Latreille, which is like a memoir and kind of a look at Montana and their indigenous people. Uh-huh. He grew up kind of knowing his dad was native, but like his dad always denied it and was always like, because they could pass. And so he's never really sure like why his dad didn't want to kind of claim that heritage, but he certainly didn't pass any of it on to Chris. And so then the dad dies and Chris is like, I feel like I want to be sure that I am. And so he like does the research and kind of manages to get enrolled. But it talks a lot about blood quantum and what it means for tribes right now and how like a lot of people think it's about the money, that's why people want to enroll. But like for a lot of tribes, there's not a lot of money out there. Like, yes, some of the tribes have casinos and there is money being distributed, but like people think the government is giving all the tribes a bunch of money, and that's actually not the case.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
What's the who's the woman that wrote Warrior Girl Unearthed? Boulay.
Angeline Boulay.
Yeah. Boulay or Boulay or whatever. I think we learned a lot about from her novels as well. The same sort of dynamic. But also I wanted to talk about, so like I do think this is going to get like National Book Award and Pulitzer attention and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I was trying to put my finger on what, yes, it's the story, right? Like we need more, stories about these populations. It's, it's not about people living in New York City. It's not about, people on Nantucket, right? Like it's telling a story that people haven't really heard very much. And I think that's part of it, like is that uniqueness. But as you read the writing, as you like think about the way that he constructs his stories, like what is it he's doing that's super literary? Do you have ideas? Right. I have a couple of ideas.
Like I said, I wish I'd read it more recently, but for me, I just remember that he had certain sentences, like the way he kind of ends his paragraphs, that like he just has these kind of, they're not necessarily zingers, but they're like these sentences that like stay with you and make you think about the whole paragraph that just came before. Do you know what I mean? Like they're short and like very powerful. So that's what I remember about, like from the like, line by line.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
Well, for me, like, so part of it I think is it's like the anti-pacing, right? Like there is no pacing in this book, right? Which is
but it works. Like I kept turning the pages.
Totally. Yeah. No, I think so that sort of speaks for itself, like that it can be this compelling with like there's like basically no plot, and if there is a plot, it like he's so bad. So one of the things that I love about this main character is so bad at telling stories. Mm-hmm. And it's like somehow he can make a compelling story out of stories badly told, because like he's always like going forward and behind and back and I forgot to tell you this part, and like if you were listening to this guy talk around a fire, you'd be like, get on with it, dude, what are you doing? Like I'm so confused,
right?
But like that, so I think that is really hard to do, right? Is to like have this bad storyteller be your storyteller and still like, because he'll like forget something that he told you. And he sort of does the thing where like, you know, it's kind of the foreshadowing, like what happened to his stepfather, Frederick, you know?
Right.
But he doesn't make us wait that long. You know, he makes us wait like 100 pages to get the full story kind of, you know, and you can it's kind of legitimate why you don't hear the whole thing. Like it definitely drops us in the middle of something that would be nice to have a little more background. It felt a little cheap at times. Like you could have just, you know, kind of give us that.
You could have just told us. Yeah.
Just told, you know, I didn't need to wait this long for that.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is like, so no pacing and it's really slow. And again, like lots of pretty details and things that seem really real. But it's also sort of like anti-sensationalist. It celebrates the normal, you know, like this guy who lives next to his mother is like a hoarder of junk and has had his kid taken away and like is funny looking, isn't a dickhead and like breaks into our house and like, you know, I just know that dude. Like that dude,
right.
Ray, that dude lives in every small town America. And it's not like you never get the idea of like, oh, look at me. I'm shining a spotlight on, you know, these people.
Yes.
Just the most normal thing ever.
He makes it feel incredibly
so
natural.
Normal.
Right. But also treats everybody with a lot of respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like this dude, I mean, you know, his buddy Bobby that he goes drinking with all the time and is like a total moron, you know, just idiot. I guess just like, hey, Bobby, you know.
Right. He's like pretty messed up in some way. And like, but it's like almost a celebration of these people of like, they're all good people at heart. Like,
right. But I think it never feels to me like it's a celebration, right? Like that's like the thing that I react to is when I feels like I'm being told how to feel. And I never feel that.
You
like,
don't feel that way at all.
No,
ever.
I'm just like watching this and just like, wow, that's a fucking train wreck. But like, you don't, you know, it's never like, but his heart was great. And like, I don't know what his heart was like, you know, like he doesn't give that information.
I mean, I also think the stuff with the mom who is like, you know, suffering from dementia and it's getting kind of increasingly worse throughout the novel. Like those are some incredible moments and you never feel like this is a writer kind of making up something like, you know, oh, the mom doesn't know what she's talking about, but it's something, she's saying something incredibly poignant,
no,
you know?
Never.
Like,
no, it's always so, like actually the dialogue.
It's always just
amazing.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Because you never know where it's going or coming from. And like, he's so sanguine about it as the narrator is so sanguine about it. Like, oh, I don't know what the fuck mom's talking about.
Yeah.
And like the shit with like the stuffed elephant and stuff. Like you can just see this demented woman with this stuffed elephant treating it like a baby and like treating it like, oh,
he's like walking into the hospital with like the elephant in like a baby carrier or whatever.
And it's like there are like these great absurdist moments too, like, but it's never like, oh, look at this absurdist moment. Like it's just like, oh my god, what is happening? You know. I'm actually not 100% done with it. I might have more to say on it when I finish it. I've got like another 50 pages. I've tried to finish it in time.
The end is actually pretty fast paced. Like you were talking about there being no plot. I mean, there is kind of a plot that comes in at the end and makes it like pretty, you know, swift.
Right. Let's talk about a swift plot that you've read.
Okay. My Return of Ellie Black by Emma Cogine.
Mm-hmm.
This was listened to, and I started it and kind of immediately disliked the various narrators, and so was going to turn it off.
There are multiple narrators?
There are multiple narrators. And actually, so then eventually there were a couple that I liked, and I definitely heard their voices before on other books. And so I was kind of like, okay, I like these narrators enough. There were some that I really didn't like, but, and then also the story, like it felt like pathological listening to it. I was like, why am I doing this to myself? Like, you know, it's like the premise is this girl shows up like on a hiking trail after being missing for 2 years.
Oh.
And so you're like, where was she? What happened to her? And you pretty quickly find out like, yeah, she was like kidnapped by like 2 psycho dudes who like have kidnapped a couple of other women women are keeping them on this like weirdo compound and like,
Right.
you know, sexually assaulting them regularly. And so you're just like, why would I want to listen? Why would I want to read this book?
No.
But except that I got far enough in that I was like, well, now I have to figure out what happened because like I did get hooked. So I guess there's something compelling about that. But it was also just like a strange experience because the last book I read by Emiko Jean, and she does seem pretty prolific, was like this very sweet YA novel about like, you know, this girl in California who's been brought up by her white mom and doesn't really know her Japanese dad. But then she finds out her Japanese dad is Prince, and like he comes and takes her to Japan where she's a princess, and she like, you know, falls in love with the bodyguard. You know, it's just like very charming and sweet. Yeah.
Next book, everybody's getting sexually assaulted and murdered.
No, it's just like here. So
well, that's a lot of production value if you have like that many voices narrating.
I know, yes.
Is this a big book? I've never heard of this book.
Well, so the YA book, which is called Tokyo Dreaming or something like that. Sorry, I should have written it down. That was a Reese Witherspoon YA selection. So I think it was like a pretty big bestseller.
Right.
And then once that happens, like your subsequent books are like, okay, now you're a name. Like this is going to be big. But you know, and we usually have the book in the store, and I do feel like it's going to be like a hard book for me to recommend because I'm just kind of like, I don't know if you like really like psycho things, like, yeah, here you go. But just kind of feel like I don't know. It was a tough one for me.
Well, I have a great segue into Keanu Reeves and China Miéville's The Book of Elsewhere. Because if you don't like death and carnage, you should definitely not read this book. Very violent.
High body count.
High body count. Lots of people dying. But the thing is, it's basically the story, right? So the story in some ways is really simple. It's about the main character. I guess it's the main character. The main character is an 80,000-year-old unkillable warrior who was created by some like ancient spirit god or something when whatever the people were like 80,000 years ago were being attacked by this rival village. The mom of this 80,000-year-old warrior prayed to a god for a, savior. And this person was born to her and within like 2 weeks had grown to be a fully grown man and was just agent of death and would just go to the tribe that messed with his mom and just wiped him off the face of the earth. And so now this story is set in contemporary United States. And of course, the U.S. military has made friends with this unkillable warrior and tries to like use him to their own advantages, even though he makes clear all the time, like, I'm actually using you, Okay. And so what's cool about it, right? So you can see this guy is clearly Keanu Reeves. Like, you can just picture him. And he's like, he's going to shoot you with guns and, do karate or whatever. It's
like a little John Wick.
He's like, it's like John Wick as a, 80,000-year-old unkillable warrior. And so it's like, it has very cinematic quality. But what's great about it is it's like when the like touchy-feely therapy movement comes to the U.S. military, right? And so like this 80,000-year-old unkillable warrior has like sessions with a psychotherapist and like takes SSRIs and, has conversations about the meaning of life. And we see there are these vignettes from the past where like we see, little slices of this 80,000-year-old warrior's life or whatever, as we learn. And so it's a really interesting treatise on immortality, right? And so he talks all the time about he doesn't want to die. He wants to be able to die. So So the psychotherapist is like, are you still having suicidal ideation? And he's like, I'm not suicidal. Like, I don't want to die. I just want to be able to die.
Right. Someday I would like to maybe die.
Exactly. Right. Like the idea, knowing that you will never die actually makes it impossible to live. Right. And also like, how do you, and like, there's all kinds of cool little scenes where he was surprised and he thought to himself, it's the first time I've been surprised by anything in 10,000 years or whatever, like this kind of just little cool moments of like, what would it be like? I think they handle what it would be like to be 80,000 years old pretty well, in a way that like, it's because that like more like Interview with a Vampire or whatever, they have all kind of had like similar sort of thoughts. So
I mean, as soon as you said what you said about the main character, I was like, Andy, was he a vampire? But
very
like,
similar.
Yes, we've covered that ground. In the Vampire
very similar,
books.
And it plays with a lot of those tropes, because it's also absurdist, right? And so he's also kind of searching for other people like himself, right? And the only being he can find that is like himself is this unkillable pig. Because something similar happened. Like these pigs were being attacked by like a rival pig nation or whatever. And this pig was imbued with this same like immortality, right?
Can he communicate with? Is it a talking pig?
No, it's not a talking pig. Great. But so the way that they're immortal is that like, when they finally, it's really hard to kill them. But when they do finally die, they are like reborn in like this egg sac or whatever. And they like come back out of it or whatever, right? And so, he learns about this like cult of this pig and like learns that this pig also comes out of this egg sac. And so he like meets this pig and this pig hates him. And so there's this whole like absurdist line about how this pig, every time it's reborn, goes and tries to like hunt him down and kill him and like has actually killed him like 3 times or something. And so it's like, I don't know, like China Mieville, it's definitely a little bit of a work. Like it's stylized writing, especially in the open. It opens like really stylized with like truncated sentences, and he does a lot of things where he'll like break paragraphs in half weird and it's not an easy read, but like once you get into the flow of it, like it's just a really odd and fun book that like fucks with a lot of
there's an exhibit at the
fantasy or John Wick, whatever kind of tropes. And I like the first 20 pages, I was like, oh my God, this sucks. And then once I powered through it, like I ended up like loving it. It was just it's such a story. You've never read this story. It's just so weird. Yeah. And cool. I kind of like the way it wrapped. It wrapped in a satisfying, strange way.
Nice. It's funny that you said that about how it was written, because I did just start this book, which I wasn't going to talk about because it doesn't come out till September, and it's a middle grade book called Impossible Creatures by Catherine Rundell. And it is kind of starts the same way with like these super short chapters, and they're like just written in like, like they're magical kind of sentences. Like, it's just, you just can't sustain it. Right. And as you're reading, you're like, this is unsustainable. Like at some point we have to like actually get to know these characters, and we need a little bit more. But I was just thinking about like, could she sustain it? And she did go on for quite a while, but now we have gotten into some longer chapters and more character development and just kind of like more of a like regular style of verse or whatever. Anyway, cool. I mean, I think that sounds fun.
I think it's going to be a big book. Like, I think it's, it's not necessarily like Sarah J. Maas type popular or whatever, but like, I think, it's a Del Rey book. I don't know. I think all the Tor people are going to be into it. Like all the like Dungeons and Dragons-y type people are going to be into it. Like, I think it's got a lot of crossover. And I guess China Mieville is popular. Like, I've read Kraken.
I think so. I mean, you're right. I don't think he's done anything in a while.
Well, and I think that's the Wired story is all about. I guess he had like a nervous breakdown or something. Like, or I don't know. Like, he had some sort of thing that was, maybe it was just writer's block or whatever. So I don't know how I didn't get far enough to read how he teamed up with Keanu, but
So I don't have a great segue because my last book is really different, but it is kind of like we're coming full circle because I think this could work as a summer read.
Aha.
A Good Life by Virginie Grimaldi. So like I said, this is a book that came here via France, where apparently it was a big bestseller. And it's a story of two sisters who have been sort of estranged, but their grandmother has died, and they meet up at her little cottage in like the south of France, or, not in Paris, but we're in France in the countryside. And they're supposed to be like kind of cleaning out her house and getting ready to sell it. They have new owners are moving in soon. So it's like their last time in the house. And you kind of discover the grandmother was like this, they would go to her every summer and live with her. And she was like the one kind of good figure in their lives. Like so then each chapter you go back in time, every other chapter you go back in time and you get the story of the girls growing up. So you kind of like, it takes you like through the years. Like each chapter is like a year later or a couple of years later.
Yeah.
And you discover very quickly that the mom was a train wreck and was doing a terrible job raising them. And so they were, they were quite close because they were always, living in fear of their mom. Various
teamed up against to survive the experience of being raised by parents. Yes.
But the main character is the older sister, and then like the younger sister had some, as she got into teenagehood, had some like mental health issues and eventually got like a diagnosis, and I think she's bipolar. So the older sister at some point like couldn't handle that, and so like disappeared for a while, but now she's like back. So they're coming back together. So it's like, I don't have a sister, whatever, but it seems like a really good sister story.
Right. Yeah.
And there's this kind of driving question of like, well, what drove their estrangement in the first place? And then the older sister clearly has a secret that she needs to tell the younger sister, but it takes her the whole book to tell it, of course, like the whole 5 days. So that gets like a little annoying where you're like, just tell her.
Can we just lay the secret on her at this point?
Yeah, totally. And then the secret, like, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it is, it's like just set up to make you cry at the end.
Oh, well.
So,
there's some people, I see it all the time, can recommend me a book that's going to make me cry at the end.
Totally. This will make you cry at the end.
All right.
Yeah. I would say it's like, it's got a little bit of like Beaches vibes, that movie, but it's like in France.
Is there anything that strikes you as particularly French and that like the cultural translation is interesting?
Writing style to me, just like, you're always like, is this the trans or is this like just like a French style of writing? But like, there is kind of like a work and translation feel to it, which like I enjoy. I think some people like, but sometimes it's like a little stilted and you're just like not sure if that's like something lost in translation.
Yeah. Am I experiencing something French or am I experiencing bad translation?
Right. But there's a lot of great stuff about like what living in the countryside in the summer is like, which just seems glorious, and they're like going to the beach and they're like, I don't know. So there's some, it feels very French, and they grew up in Paris. So like, you get the city stuff.
City kids. Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds pretty good. I think that we have reached the end of our agenda. We do have other events in addition to our Summer Reads Sunday Salon that you should go check out on our website, bookshopbeverlyfarms.com. And don't forget to like and share our podcast wherever you find it, whether it's YouTube or Spotify. I thought Spotify was a big vector for us, but people are just not really Spotifying. They seem to be gravitating to the YouTube and the Apple. But wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find John Updike's Ghost. And we could always use 5 stars. We get a number of 5-star reviews on the bookshop in the Google Marketplace, which is terrific. So if you ever think to yourself, I'm going to leave a 5-star review, do it. That sounds great. I don't think there's anything else of import. I'm trying to think of anything.
I think we're good. I mean, I've got a million books I'm trying to read, so trying to bring it 3 every time. We'll see if I can keep it up.
Yeah, I know. Well, I don't know what I'm reading next is my problem. I need another batch of ARCs. So I'm not going to read. I know you sent Jonathan Letham's publicist. I said nice things about Jonathan Letham. So you sent me this weird, obscure treatise that he put together about like art or something. And it's formatted in a way that is virtually impossible to read. So I didn't read it. But cool. Jonathan Lethem does seem very, very smart.
That's great. I have some books I could send you.
Okay. Yeah, send them. I was down there. I'll be down there again soon, I'm sure.
Right. I'll get some together. There's some good stuff I'm looking at right now.
Maybe
music related books.
Are we getting together for Father's Day? Maybe Father's Day gathering or something.
I don't think so. Sorry.
It's all right. I did Mother's Day with our mother. I'll do Father's Day with our father. You can just, pretend you're a member of the family. That's great.
Yeah, I already sent a gift up to Dad. So.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
We've got people coming.
Give them the same book that I gave him. I didn't tell you what book I got for him.
Guess we'll find out. You can write another piece for the quick.
That'd be amazing if we both gave him the same book. I bet we did. That could be bad. I didn't tell you what I got. The little pairing I got for graduation for our neighbor Ava went over like gangbusters.
What'd you get?
I got her How to Love, the Thin Thought Fecht. I don't know how to say his name. Thich
Nhat Hanh?
Yes, that guy. I don't know how to say it.
Great.
It just looks like nonsense words to me. So I got his book, How to Love, little thin book.
Nice.
And then I paired it with the How to Money book that we had.
Ooh, good. I love that.
So she knows both how to love and how to manage her money as she heads off into the world. It went over well.
That's so great.
Yeah. And we did give her $100. We decided that $50 was too cheap nowadays and gave her $100.
That is so good of you. Oh, I'm so glad. I think graduation season's mostly over, but we still have some good stuff in the store. Yeah. Also, we're working on Father's Day, gifting, lots of people coming in. And then after that, I think we're just...
What's the Rick Rubin book again?
Summer. The Creative Way.
The Creative Way. I told you I sold 3 copies of the
I know,
Creative
and then he
Way.
came in on Monday and was like, do you have any more in yet? I was like, buddy, no, we didn't get any in on Sunday.
It's such a good graduation present. So.
I know, I thought I had a decent amount on hand.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you had known I was going to be hand selling the shit out of it, you would have more in there. Right. Not everybody is the talented that I am. All right. Seems like we have reached the absurdist part of this
we're just
podcast.
rambling now.
All right. We will see all of you later. Thanks for listening.